poor widow saved a drowning child. 20 years later, he returned with a secret welcome to our channel, where every story touches the heart and stays with you long after. If you're watching this, we'd love to know, where in the world are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below and share your corner of the world with us. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because tomorrow we'll bring you another powerful story that just might change the way you see life. Thank you for being here. It means more than you know. It was a blazing hot afternoon in the middle of July. The sun bore down on the small, quiet town of Willow Creek, Arkansas, turning the dirt roads into shimmering ribbons of heat. The air was heavy, the kind that made every breath feel like lifting a weight. Margaret Collins, a 54-year-old widow with weathered hands and tired feet, trudged along the dusty path leading out of town. Her shoulders hunched beneath the weight of an old canvas backpack, stuffed with a bottle of lukewarm water, a few cleaning supplies, and a half loaf of bread from yesterday's shift. She had just finished another long day scrubbing floors in a nearby diner, and all she wanted was to get back to her crooked little house on the edge of town. Nestled near a quiet bend in the Little Missouri River, her home was more than just four walls and a roof. It was her last anchor. What was left, after her husband passed, and her world had quietly fallen apart. As she neared the small, overgrown trail that led to her house, Margaret paused. She heard something, a sound so faint it could have been the wind or maybe her imagination. A soft, hoarse cry. At first she dismissed it, but then it came again, a desperate, almost inaudible whisper. "Help!" Margaret froze. Instinct kicked in before logic had a chance. She dropped her backpack into the grass and pushed through the tall reeds toward the riverbank. Her heart pounded as she scanned the rippling water. And then she saw it. A small figure, barely more than a child, was drifting in the middle of the current. His arms flailed weakly, his head bobbing below the surface again and again. He couldn't have been more than 9 years old, and he was losing the fight. Without a second thought, Margaret kicked off her sandals and stepped into the water. It was colder than she expected, sharp and biting even in the summer heat. The current tugged at her legs, urging her to turn back, to let go. But she didn't. She hadn't swum in decades, but that didn't matter now. Every step forward was a battle. She slipped once, swallowing a mouthful of river water. Her legs trembled, her breath came in gasps, but she pushed on. When she finally reached the boy, he was unconscious, his small body limp in the water. With shaking hands, she grabbed his shirt and pulled him close, keeping his chin above the surface. It took every ounce of strength she had to get them both back to shore. She stumbled, fell, crawled through the mud and reeds, clutching the boy in her arms. When they reached dry ground, she collapsed beside him, chest heaving, eyes stinging with sweat and fear. And then finally he coughed, a ragged, wet cough that broke the silence like a prayer. His eyes opened, wide, frightened, searching. Margaret cradled his soaked face and whispered, "You're safe now, sweetheart. I've got you." And in that moment, neither of them knew it yet, but both of their lives had just changed forever. The boy didn't speak at first. Not when Margaret dried him off with the only clean towel she had. Not when she stripped off his soaked clothes and tucked him gently into her small, sun-faded bed under the window. And not even when she handed him a warm mug of herbal tea and sat by his side in silence. He stared at her with wide, watchful eyes, unsure if he had landed in safety or in something he didn't yet understand. Margaret asked softly, "What's your name, sweetheart?" He shook his head. "Where are you from?" Nothing. Just a whisper of breath and a blink. Margaret exhaled, her heart aching at the sight of this lost, fragile boy. His skin was pale, his lips still tinged blue, and his frame far too thin for a child his age. Whatever storm had brought him to that riverbank hadn't just tried to take his life. It had stripped away his identity. "Well," she said after a moment, "I can't just call you Hey You. How about Eli?" The boy looked up. There was a flicker in his eyes, small, hesitant, but real. Then he nodded. From that day on, Eli became her shadow. He followed her from room to room, clutching the hem of her apron like a lifeline. He didn't speak much, but his presence filled the silence of her lonely little home in a way that warmed the cracks in her heart. Each night, he'd wake up drenched in sweat, eyes wide, whispering words she couldn't understand. She'd sit by his bedside, holding his hand, humming old folk songs her own mother once sang to her. Word got around the town quick. It always did in places like Willow Creek. "Did you hear? Margaret Collins pulled some river kid out of nowhere," muttered. "One woman at the market, she's lost it," another scoffed. "She can barely feed herself. And now this?" But Margaret didn't flinch. She kept her head down, her focus on Eli. Every morning she packed up her mop and gloves, walked the same dusty road into town, and came home with sore feet and a tired smile. For him, Eli slowly began to bloom in her care. He helped carry firewood, swept the porch, and even learned to make soup from scratch. And though he rarely said much, one afternoon while sitting on the porch steps, he turned to her and asked, "Why did you save me?" Margaret didn't answer right away. She looked out over the yard, where the sun painted the grass gold. "Because I couldn't walk away," she said. "Because from the moment I saw you, you were mine." Eli didn't say anything, but after a moment he leaned into her, rested his head against her arm, and from that day forward he called her Mama, not by blood, but by something stronger. Love, and just like that, two broken hearts started to heal, together. The seasons changed slowly in Willow Creek. Summer gave way to a golden autumn, and with each passing day, Margaret and Eli grew closer. He still didn't remember where he came from, but he remembered how it felt to be safe, to be held, to be called son. Margaret did everything she could to keep them afloat. She picked up extra cleaning shifts, at the butcher shop by noon, the school in the evenings, and the nursing home just after sunrise. Her hands were cracked, raw from bleach, her knees ached, and her back throbbed by the end of each day. But when she came home and saw Eli waiting at the gate, waving with that crooked little smile, every pain melted away. Eli never asked for toys or new clothes or sweets like most kids his age. He swept the porch, fetched water from the pump, helped chop kindling for the stove. When the weather turned cold, he'd bundle himself up in the old scarf Margaret knit him and race to meet her halfway down the road. He'd always say, "I missed you, Mama," and she'd always answer, "I missed you more." But life was getting harder. The nights were colder. The firewood pile grew thin, the pantry even thinner. Margaret skipped meals so Eli wouldn't have to. Still, she never let him see her worry. One night, as the wind howled outside and the last two logs burned low in the stove, she pulled him close beneath a double-folded blanket and whispered, "We'll get through this, my boy." That night, Eli didn't sleep. He lay still beside her, eyes open, heart pounding. He had a plan. By morning, he had made a decision. He would change their future. The next week, Margaret marched into the mayor's office, her coat too thin for the early frost, and asked one thing. "I want Eli to go to school." The mayor frowned. "He's got no papers, no last name, no past." Margaret's voice didn't shake. "He has a heart, he has a mind, and he deserves a future." Reluctantly, the mayor agreed. School was a different kind of battlefield. Eli arrived with second-hand books and a patched-up backpack Margaret had sewn by hand. The other kids mocked him, called him River Boy, laughed at his worn-out shoes. But Eli didn't flinch. He sat in the front row, answered every question, and stayed late to clean the chalkboards. The teachers noticed. So did the principal. At home, Eli never mentioned the teasing. He just helped cook dinner, read his lessons by candlelight, and made Margaret laugh with questions about the stars, about words, about how things worked. Then one day he came home quieter than usual. Margaret noticed right away. "What happened, Eli?" she asked. He hesitated, then softly said, "They laughed because I don't have a mom or dad. Because we're poor." Margaret cupped his face in her hands. You listen to me. You are not poor. You are rich in courage, in love, in purpose, and I am proud of you." Those words sank into his heart like seeds in the earth, and that night, Eli made a silent promise. One day, Mama will never have to work again. Time moved faster after that promise. Eli grew taller, stronger, and even more determined. By the time he turned 15, he was top of his class in every subject: math, science, literature. Teachers whispered about him in the hallways. "That boy's a genius," one said. "A miracle," said another. But Eli didn't let the praise distract him. Every compliment, every award, every A+ was just another step toward the vow he made to Margaret. One day, she'll never have to work again. That year, something incredible happened. He won a full academic scholarship to a boarding school in Jefferson City, Missouri, the best in the state. Margaret was speechless when the letter came. She stared at the envelope like it held a piece of the sky. "You have to go, Mama," Eli said, smiling through nervous eyes. "You always told me the world was bigger than Willow Creek." Margaret nodded slowly. Her heart was breaking and bursting all at once. "Then go show them what you're made of, baby." On the morning of his departure, she packed a small brown bag with dried fruit, a folded-up scarf, and a wooden owl pendant she'd carved herself, a symbol of wisdom. At the bus station, they hugged for a long time, neither wanting to let go. "I'll come back in a suit and with a future," Eli whispered. She laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Just don't forget who you are." The bus pulled away. Margaret stood there waving long after it disappeared over the hill. Back in her little house, the silence was loud. The bed was still made, the chair empty, but her heart stayed full. Letters began arriving weekly, filled with stories of dorm life, huge libraries, and difficult classes. Margaret read them each night at the kitchen table, holding them close like prayers. Eli didn't waste a second at school. While others played sports or went to the movies, he spent late nights in the library, poring over textbooks, scribbling ideas into a notebook he titled "Plan for Later." On the first page, he wrote in bold letters, "Mom will never be cold again." After graduation, he applied to universities across the country: Boston, Seattle, Chicago. But his first choice was Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Why? Because there, a professor he admired taught artificial intelligence. The same subject Eli had become obsessed with. He was accepted with honors. College life was intense. Eli lived in a small dorm room with 5 roommates. He ate instant noodles and oatmeal with water, but he didn't complain. Every late night, every missed party, every lonely weekend was worth it. In the quiet hours, he began building something: an app, a health journal for patients like Margaret, who often didn't know how to describe their pain. He called it Hope Track. At first, it was just code on a screen. Then he showed it to one of his professors, who said, "You might have something real here, son. This could change lives." Eli smiled. He already knew, because it had already changed his. Success didn't come easy. Even with the praise from his professor, Eli's journey building Hope Track was anything but smooth. He worked out of a shared co-working space, juggling classes by day and writing code by night. The app had glitches. The first launch flopped. Some users gave up. Others complained the interface was too clunky. Funding dried up. Investors pulled out. There were nights Eli sat alone under the dim light of his desk, staring at the screen with his head in his hands, wondering if he'd made a mistake. But every time doubt crept in, he pulled out an old photo from his wallet: Margaret, standing in their garden with folded arms, wearing that familiar, tired smile. He whispered, "For you, Mama," and kept going. He rewrote the code, rebuilt the interface, simplified the design. He reached out to hospitals, listened to doctors, adjusted features. And then one day, an email changed everything. A major hospital group in St. Louis wanted to test Hope Track in a pilot program. Eli drove 6 hours through the night, rehearsing his pitch in the car. At the meeting, he stood in front of a dozen Seasoned medical professionals, his hands trembling but his voice steady. "This app isn't just software," he told them. "It's for the people who suffer quietly. People like my mother who worked 3 jobs and never once complained about her pain." The room was silent. Then a doctor stood up and said, "Let's try it." The trial was a success. Word spread. Downloads surged. Investors returned. News outlets picked up the story. Young developer revolutionizes patient care. But even as Hope Track grew, Eli stayed grounded. He still wore the same watch Margaret gave him on his 16th birthday. He still kept her old scarf in his drawer, and every Sunday he mailed her a handwritten letter, just like she used to write him. Then, one rainy Thursday, he got a call from a neighbor back in Willow Creek. Margaret hadn't been seen in days. Panic shot through him. He canceled meetings, rescheduled everything, and drove through the night to Arkansas. When he reached the house, the lights were off. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like dried herbs and old wood. On the table was a letter in trembling handwriting. "Dear Eli, if you're reading this, I might be with Mrs. Riley. Or in the hospital. Don't worry, I've had a full life. You made it more than I ever dreamed." He found her 2 hours later, lying in a hospital bed in Little Rock, pale and fragile, but still smiling when he walked in. "You came," she whispered. He took her hand, tears falling freely. "Of course I did, Mama." After her recovery, Eli moved her to a cozy cottage just outside of D.C., a place with a garden, a porch swing, and sunlight in every room. They spent mornings drinking tea, afternoons tending tomatoes, and evenings laughing like old times. When she passed years later, it was gentle, peaceful, just as she lived, quiet but strong. Eli stood at her grave, holding the wooden owl she once carved for him. "You saved me," he said. "Now I'll carry your love forward." And so he did. Through Hope Track, through his foundation for foster youth, through every story he told of a tired woman in worn-out shoes who once dove into a river and pulled out not just a boy, but a future. This story was more than just a tale. It was a reminder that love isn't always about blood, but about choice, sacrifice, and quiet courage. If this touched your heart even a little, we'd love to hear from you. What part of Eli and Margaret's journey resonated with you the most? Have you ever known someone who made a life-changing difference without asking for anything in return? Maybe it was a parent, a teacher, a neighbor, or maybe you have been that person for someone else. Please take a moment to share your thoughts. In the comments below, we read every single one and your stories matter. And while you're at it, let us know where in the world you're watching from. We're building a global community here, one story at a time. If this video reminded you of someone special, tag them or send it their way. It might just bring back a memory worth revisiting. Lastly, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because tomorrow we're bringing you another story, one that just might change the way you look at love, sacrifice, and second chances. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for listening.